Hey everybody, it's Randy. Welcome to another data structure and data variables video in Unreal Engine 5. So last video we kind of went over the different types with the basic types, Boolean, byte, all the way up to text. But we didn't cover vector, rotators, transforms, structures, and enums. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, I will give a forewarning. I'm no expert in physics, but I do understand how they are actually transferred, though, vectors, rotators, and transforms to computer science, and specifically the Unreal Engine. So if you want to create them, again, you can go in here and actually select them. And when you go over to the actual variable itself, you can see we have an X, Y, and Z, and that's the like a graph, like a 3D graph, the X, Y, and Z location. With the rotator, it's very similar. It's the X, Y, and Z rotations. And then the transform is a combination of a vector, a rotation, and a scale. Now, if you've done Unreal Engine before, you'll know scale. If you go here, and you can actually, here we go. So if you go to this mesh, this is the transform of the object. Let's actually go to the mesh itself. And so if you increase the scale, it's just like blowing it up. And you could do that in the X, you could do that in the Y, you could do that in the Z. And then again, the rotation. This is the X, the roll. And so you can see it kind of rolls around the pivot location there, around its origin specifically. The pitch, which is like this. And that's kind of like the Y, the pitch. And then you have the Z, which it rotates around it like that. And then you have, furthermore, the location, which is just a 3D space. You have your X-axis, your Y-axis, your Z-axis, all of this good stuff. Oh no, let's go ahead and take that out. So back to the event graph. So if we create one, we can call them here. And we can set our X, Y, and Z's to them. And then again, the transform is a combination of the two. Now, if you are in blueprints and you want to actually get the individual values, you can click on it. And you can call something like break, rotator, vector, or transform. And so you can see green in Unreal Engine, by the way, is a float. So you can see here that if we plug it in, it's going to take whatever value we have in here, and it's going to break it down into the float values, the roll, the pitch, and the yaw. And the float, remember, is something that can be represented by a decimal, negative and positive. And same with the vector here. We can break that apart, and we can get the individual X, Y, and Z values. And for the transform, it kind of does it even further. Take it in, and you can break it down to the location, rotation, scale. But you can break it down even more. You can break it down, like you said here, individually in here with the scale. Or you can combine them and call the breaks for the vectors and the rotators. And they're super, super helpful. If you're making a game, you're more than likely going to be using them. If you find a way around using them, please let me know. Like I said, they're all just stored in values. But that's the basics of them. Now, there are ways, there's things called vector addition and rotator addition, and I can go over those eventually. Those are pretty complicated, especially for me. I'm not a super big physics guy, but I get the gist of them. But going from that point on, we're going to talk about structures. So if you remember in the last video, we kind of talked about how the arrays, sets, and maps store individual single values in certain ways, through a key and value pair, or non-duplicates, just table of values, or a duplicates allowed table of values, the array. And so the structure is like creating your own. So I've created my own structure here. And what you could do in here is I've already created 4 variables. And so these 4 variables, I've just made a Boolean, a vector, a rotator, and a transform. And you can, again, set these to pretty much, you can set these pretty much to whatever value you want, which is really, really nice. And you can even set the structure to itself, a little bit of inception. And so you can create a little tooltip here. What do you want it to be actually equal to? You can add more values, and you can add as many as you want. Now, if you want to create your own, you just go into your content drawer. You'll right click, and you will go down to blueprints, and you'll just create structure, give it a name, and then there it is. So now, how do you call this in your actual code? Well, it's just like any other variable. It's a brand new value the game now recognizes, Unreal Engine recognizes. So I can go ahead and set this test variable for here. What do I call it? A test structure. So test struct right here, and you can see it. And you can see we can even put it into an array, but we can't set it into a set or a map. Or, yeah, we can't. But you can see here. So remember, I created one with a boolean, a vector, a rotator, and a transform. And so you can store the boolean, the vector, the rotator, and the transform. You can name it whatever you want. So I can go in here, and then now let's say you want to get the actual specific value in the structure. Well, you'll just pull off of it, and you'll call break test structure. And so this breaks it just like it broke the vectors, rotators, and transforms. And so now you can see your boolean and all that. And again, you can right click on it and break it. Or you can recombine it. You can drag this over here, throw the vector in, and I'm breaking it. And so let's go ahead and just print it out just so you see it. We'll go ahead and set this value. Is it the X? Just gonna set all of them, and we can go ahead and you can see we broke it. We got it. Oh, I definitely messed up these arms. That's okay. And so that's how the structure kind of works. And they're super useful if you don't want to create a whole new class. You still want to store things, but you can't store them in anything that's already given. Well, you can create a new structure to store all this, and you can pass the structure along. You can create new structures. It's a really, really great feature, and it's in Unreal Engine, and it's in most programming languages as well, which is really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. I don't need it. And so now we're going to go over quickly enums. So again, go to blueprints. Enumeration is what it stands for. And we're just, typically the prefix for it is capital E. We're just going to call it tester enum. And so you can open it and add an enumerator. So this enumerator, we can name it hello. Or actually, no, we can just name it male, female. This is a better example. So let's say you want to label a character a certain value. We want to know if they're male or female. Now, you could have a boolean, but what if you can't do a boolean, So instead of male or female, you could say, what kind of car? Ford, Mazda. And we'll add another one. We'll add, what's a cool car? There's none. That's not true. Chevy. We'll just do Chevy. Because that's the first thing that came to mind. So, okay. So we have Ford, Mazda, and Chevy because maybe Boolean isn't going to work. But we still want to know what kind of value that is. And technically, you could kind of store this into a string and then set the string. But that's gonna cause a huge performance hindrance. Because you're always checking the string, you're always resetting all the characters within a string, versus this is a value and it sees if it's set to that. And so what we can call is we can create a new enum. I'm going to look for it. What do I call it? E-tester. Oh boy, I can't spell. E-tester enum. So we can click it. And I'll go in a little bit more detail on why that's actually faster. Oh boy. So if you see here, you got a drop down box now if you can select Ford, Mazda, or Chevy. And so this is really, really useful. And you could do the same thing here. You could set them in arrays, sets, or maps. They're really, really helpful when you set them as keys and maps, or if you set them as values. More time, I've used them a lot as keys and maps, which are super helpful. And you can print out, the enum to the console or to the screen if you want to actually see it. So you can see here, boom, Chevy. And so a lot of times you can see, if a character is passing through, something, call this value and see what it's equal to. If you want only people who like Chevys to pass through, let them pass through. If you only want people who like Mazdas to pass through, you can only let them pass through. It's just an example. But we'll go on. So what exactly, is an enum? Like, it just looks like an array or a set specifically, because no duplicates, of strings. And you're kind of right, but you're also kind of wrong. So what would be the difference of just having an array of strings? And strings are just characters, like A, B, C, D, alphanumeric characters. So what would be the difference of just having an array of strings versus having an enum? So an enum, there's actually an index, kind of similar to an array. So instead of checking, because when you check if an array value is equal, if another string is equal to this, it goes through, and if you have the word, we'll just use the same example again for some reason, Ford and Chevy. If you have this example, when you try to see if they're equal, it's going to go through and check. Is F equal to C? No. And it's going to fail. But let's say instead of Chevy, we had the word of Fordo. All right. So instead, it's going to check, is F and F equal? Yes. Is O and O the same? Yes. R? Yes. D? Yes. No. This is the odd one out. But C, what's it doing though, is it's going through and checking every single character and comparing it. And so if you're doing this a lot in your program, it's going to cause some hindrance. Probably super negligible, but if you're doing it a bunch, it will. And it's just a pain in the butt to actually write this. So instead, you have enums. So underlying, we have the enum, called Ford. I don't know why I'm using cars as an example. And we have Chevy, and let's say, what was the other one? Mazda. I like my Mazdas. I drive a Mazda, so I like Mazdas. So we have Ford, Chevy, and Mazda, okay? Mazda. And the way we check, instead of going through and actually checking if each of these characters is the same, it's almost like a map. They're associated with a number value, an index. So Ford, being the first one, is going to be associated with 1, 2, or 0, 1, and 2. So if we have another enum coming in, and it's equal to, we'll add Fordo, because that was the example we used before. So we have another enum coming in, Fordo, and we have another enum, and it's equal to Ford. And so we want to say, hey, you can't come in unless you're a Ford. Well, it's going to go through, and instead of checking every single character, it sees that it's an enum, and it instantly checks the index. And it sees, this is the index 3. Wow, that was rough. Index 3 is the index 0. They're not equal. So, you're not allowed. But we bring in Ford, We see it's an enum. We see it as an index of 3. We instantly know, or not 3, 0. We see they are the same, and we're good to go. And so that's kind of how enums work, and they're really useful for a lot of times, like if you have a first-person shooter or third-person shooter, and you want to store the current like physics state of the character. So if they're running, if they're swimming, if they're jumping, if they're wall running, sliding, all that kind of crazy stuff. Enums are a really easy way to store it instead of strings. They're very similar, but these are a lot more efficient, and these are a lot easier to read. These are much easier to read, and so I would highly recommend using them in your program, in your Unreal Engine, in your game. They're just going to make your life a lot easier storing certain values. You can store run, jump, and so on. And so instead of going through and checking these, it just checks the index, which is just super quick. You won't even notice it. I mean, you probably wouldn't notice this that much, but this is just way more readable and easier to deal with. And you can make them, you can make your own, like up in here. They're pretty easy to make. Or this is a structure in here. Now, if you look in here, you don't actually see the index of them. It's kind of auto done for you. However, you can move them around. And so when you deal with enums, you're not actually, like when you're dealing with them in blueprints, I should say, you're not actually going to see the enum value, like the index, but you can, see here. Let's see. Yeah, so you're not actually going to see that, but you can pull in another one, check if it's the same thing, turn back. And a lot of times, too, like if you write this in C++ and you specify the index number, you'll actually see it when you hover over it. But again, you just go into utilities, you can go into enum, and you can set equal, not equal, byte to enum. So that is just taking in a byte number. So remember byte that we talked about before? Remember how I said this is the index? So it's taking in this number and correlating it to whatever index and turning out a correlated enum. So if you have the number 2 and we put it in, we would return the enum Chevy. And you can also do really cool stuff. This is super helpful. If you go down to utilities, you can hit select. So based on this, whatever the value of this index is, or the value of the enum, you can pass in data and then select it based on that. And you can also, where is it? Enum. Switch. There we go. Switch. That's another one I was looking for. This one is super useful. This one, I've used this one, but most of the time I'm using the switch. And what this does is it sees the index, you run in an execution node, and based on the execution node, you will see what, you'll get a correlating execution. So if we come in here and we go here, let's see. So this is equal to Mazda. So we're gonna print another, and we're gonna say buy, I don't know, and we'll print here, and we will print good night. I don't know. So we have it set to Mazda right now. So what's it gonna do is trigger is gonna come in. It's gonna see that you have an input of the enum, etest or enum, and based on that, it's gonna flip it kind of like a train path, and switch it to Mazda, and now whatever's on this is gonna run instead. So if we go in here, we click it, buy, and let's see, and then if we switch this to board, we'll get our typical hello message. So yeah, that is the enums and structures. They're pretty simple once you get the hang of them, and you can create all of this in C++. And I can show that eventually in another video. But leave a comment down below. Share this with your friends. If you have any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to help you. And just take care, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.